my wife revealed. I'm pregnant, but I need a DNA test to confirm if it's yours or Kyle's, my boss. I responded calmly, no issue. Then we booked a DNA test. What the doctor shared at the appointment flipped everything. I'm standing in my Upper West Side penthouse kitchen at 7:32 a.m. on a Tuesday. That's about to become the worst fucking Tuesday of my 31 years on this planet. The morning light is streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that cost more than most people's cars, illuminating my marble island where my Tesla Model S plaid key fob sits next to a half-empty bottle of San Pellegrino. I'm whisking eggs like some sort of domestic god, which is hilarious considering I usually grab a protein bar and sprint to the family office where I manage portfolios for people who think $1 million is pocket change. My Tom Ford jacket, the charcoal one that costs $3,000 and makes me look like I could buy and sell small countries, hangs on the barstool from last night's board dinner. We'd been discussing a Series B round for a legal tech startup, and I'd worn it to look the part of the sophisticated investor who definitely knows the difference between EBITDA and actual cash flow. The jacket smells like expensive cologne and the kind of confidence that comes from having your net worth increase while you sleep. Rena walks into the kitchen, and immediately I know something's wrong. My wife of 3 years, 29 years old, sharp as a fucking scalpel and twice as dangerous in a courtroom. She's one of those litigation associates at Cravath who bills 2,800 hours a year and somehow still looks like she stepped out of a magazine spread. Normally, she's already dressed in her power suit, checking emails on her phone, simultaneously drinking coffee and reviewing discovery documents like some sort of legal multitasking machine. This morning, she's in her robe, pale as a ghost, and holding something small in her hand. I'm pregnant, she says, just like that. No build-up, no romantic music, no champagne. Just those two words hanging in the air between us like a hostile takeover bid nobody saw coming. I stare at the skillet where my perfectly whisked eggs are starting to solidify into something resembling actual breakfast. The spatula feels heavy in my hand, and for a moment, I'm thinking about contract terms, specifically the ones in our prenup that my attorney Rhea Kapoor insisted we include about material changes in circumstances. Not that pregnancy is a material change, but my brain defaults to legal framework when emotional processing shuts down, which apparently it just did. Then Rena adds the kicker, the line that makes me understand why she looks like she's about to throw up, and it's not morning sickness. I need a DNA test to confirm if it's yours or Kyle's, my boss. I put the spatula down very carefully, the way you'd set down a loaded gun. The marble countertop feels cold under my palms as I lean forward, trying to process what she just said. Kyle Mercer, her supervising partner at the firm. The guy who's also CEO of Jurasight, some legal tech SaaS company that uses AI and machine learning for document review and discovery. The same Kyle Mercer whose company just raised a Series B round that I know about because I hold convertible notes through an SPV. The same Kyle Mercer who's engaged to Aria Leone, a principal at the VC fund that led their Series A. No issue, I say, and my voice sounds like it's coming from someone else entirely. Someone calmer. Someone who isn't currently calculating the financial implications of potential paternity support, HR violations, legal malpractice insurance claims, and whether this counts as dissipation of marital assets under New York family law. We book an appointment at a private clinic in Midtown, the kind of place where discretion costs extra and nobody asks questions if you pay in cash. Rena clings to me while we're making the appointment, whispering about how our rough patch earlier this year blurred some lines during the Henderson arbitration sprint. The Henderson case. I remember her working 18-hour days, coming home at midnight smelling like conference room coffee and stress sweat, talking about how Kyle was such a brilliant strategist, how he really understood complex litigation in ways other partners didn't. I walk over to my bar cart, the one with crystal decanters that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and pour 2 fingers of Macallan 25. The bottle cost $4,000, and I'd been saving it for good news. A promotion, maybe. A successful exit from one of our portfolio companies. News about starting a family. I stare at the amber liquid and don't drink it, because apparently this isn't good news. It's the kind of news that makes you question every conversation, every late night at the office, every business dinner that ran long. In my head, I'm already running scenarios like a CEO in crisis management mode. Paternity forms that need to be filed with the court. potential support obligations that could run into six figures annually, HR policy violations at her firm. Sleeping with your supervising partner is definitely against compliance rules, especially when that partner is also a vendor CEO. Conflicts of interest that could trigger malpractice claims. Professional responsibility violations that could affect her bar admission. I tell myself to think like the private equity guys I work with. Collect all the facts, control the narrative, protect the assets, and avoid making any loud moves until you understand the full scope of the situation. Due diligence first, emotional processing later. But here's the thing about control. Sometimes you think you have it right up until the moment you realize you never had it at all. I'm standing in my penthouse kitchen, holding a glass of whiskey that costs more per ounce than minimum wage workers make per hour, wearing a t-shirt from a startup that got acquired for 9 figures. And my wife just told me she's pregnant with her boss's baby. Or maybe mine. She's not sure. The eggs are burning in the pan, filling the kitchen with the smell of something that was supposed to be breakfast but turned into a metaphor for my marriage. I turn off the heat and scrape the whole mess into the garbage disposal, because apparently that's what we're doing now, throwing away things that were supposed to nourish us. Rena is crying now, quiet tears that she's trying to hide by facing the window that overlooks Central Park. From up here, the park looks like a green rectangle surrounded by buildings full of people who probably aren't dealing with paternity uncertainty at 7:45 on a Tuesday morning. Lucky them. I walk over and put my arms around her, because that's what husbands do, right? Even when their wives just dropped a bombshell that makes a hostile takeover look like a friendly merger. Her body feels smaller than usual, fragile in a way that contrasts sharply with the woman who destroys opposing counsel in depositions and negotiates settlement terms that make grown men weep. We'll figure this out, I tell her, and I mean it, even though I'm not sure what figuring it out looks like when your wife might be carrying another man's child. A man who's not just her boss, but also someone whose company is in my investment portfolio, whose fiancé sits on the board of directors of firms I do business with, whose professional network overlaps with mine in about 17 different ways that are all about to become very complicated. The irony isn't lost on me that I spend my days analyzing risk and return profiles for other people's investments, but I completely missed the signs that my own marriage was a high-risk, low-return proposition. Maybe I was too focused on the balance sheets and term sheets to notice the changes in my wife's behavior, the way she started working even later hours, the way she stopped talking about Kyle like he was just her boss and started talking about him like he was some sort of legal genius who understood her in ways I couldn't. Or maybe I saw the signs and chose to ignore them, the way investors sometimes ignore red flags in due diligence reports because they want the deal to work so badly they'll overlook obvious problems. Confirmation bias is a hell of a drug, and apparently it works just as well in marriage as it does in venture capital. The Macallan sits untouched on the counter, golden and expensive and completely useless for fixing any of this. Rena leaves for a client deposition at 9:15 a.m., her heels clicking against the marble foyer with the same confidence she's always had, like nothing just happened. Like she didn't just tell me she's pregnant and isn't sure if I'm the father or if it belongs to Kyle fucking Mercer. She kisses my cheek on the way out. The audacity of that gesture almost makes me laugh, and tells me she'll be home by 7 for dinner. Sure, honey. Let's pretend this is just another Tuesday where my wife didn't just announce potential paternity fraud over burnt eggs. The moment the elevator doors close behind her, I'm on the phone with my brother Liam. He's a nurse at Mount Sinai, which means he knows more about medical procedures than most people know about their own bodies. And he's also the only person in my family who won't immediately start asking questions about why I need to know about prenatal DNA testing. Liam learned a long time ago that when I call asking hypothetical questions, they're never actually hypothetical. Prenatal DNA testing, I say without preamble. How early can you get accurate results? Jesus, Marcus. Everything okay. Just need to know the science. Liam pauses, and I can hear him thinking through the medical implications. Cell-free fetal DNA testing can be done as early as 9 weeks. Earlier than that gets risky. Higher chance of inconclusive results or false readings. Why are you asking me this instead of Googling it like a normal person? Because Google doesn't know about family dynamics and potential legal complications. Oh, that's all he says, because Liam understands that when you're dealing with uncertainty, You need to protect yourself on paper first and process emotions later. If there's uncertainty about paternity, document everything. Protect your assets. Don't make any permanent decisions until you have facts. Smart man. This is why I pay for his health insurance. After I hang up, I create a new folder on my encrypted drive and name it Insurance, because I'm not an idiot and I don't want anyone accidentally stumbling across a folder labeled Wife's Potential Infidelity Evidence. I pull up Rena's iPad backups. Yes, we share an iCloud family account. And yes, that means I have access to her message history, which seemed romantic when we set it up and now feels like the kind of due diligence that should have come with a compliance officer's approval. What I find makes my stomach drop like a tech stock after a disappointing earnings call. Late-night messages with Kyle Mercer that go back 3 months. Thinking of you. Last night was incredible. Can't stop replaying our conversation in the conference room. Timestamps that correspond exactly with the Henderson arbitration timeline she mentioned. I screen record everything. Messages, calendar blocks showing client dinner that ran until midnight. Uber receipts that show drop-offs near Kyle's condo on the Lower East Side instead of our place on the Upper West Side. The evidence is all there, laid out like a term sheet that nobody bothered to read the fine print on. My wife has been having an affair with her boss for at least 3 months, and I've been funding it through our joint accounts. Those late-night Uber rides. Joint credit card. Those working dinners. Joint account. That weekend, she said she had to work on the Henderson brief and stayed at the Four Seasons. Joint fucking account. I move fast, because in crisis management, speed matters more than perfect decision-making. I freeze all discretionary transfers from our joint accounts. Nothing major, just the automatic investments that move money into our shared portfolio. I shift my personal brokerage account into a revocable trust under my name only, which is completely allowed under our prenup because I'm not hiding assets. I'm just reorganizing them for better tax efficiency. At least that's what I'll tell Rhea if this goes to court. I remove Rena as an authorized user on the American Express Platinum card that's tied to my family office LLC. She has her own corporate card through the law firm. So this isn't about cutting off her access to money. It's about making sure she can't rack up charges on my business credit line. I update all the beneficiary designations on my retirement accounts and enable login alerts so I'll know if anyone tries to access my financial information. I lock my credit reports and back up my complete asset spreadsheet, equity positions, safe notes, real estate holdings, carried interest in 3 different funds, and my stake in that legal tech company that's about to IPO. All of this takes me exactly 47 minutes, which is probably some kind of record for asset protection during a marital crisis. I text my compliance friend Tolu Adeyemi, who works at a white shoe firm and knows more about professional responsibility rules than most ethics professors. Hypothetical question: supervisor-subordinate affair at a law firm plus potential pregnancy. What's the HR posture? Tolu texts back within 5 minutes. Document everything. No threats. No emotional responses. Let their general counsel and HR department handle conflicts of interest and policy violations. Focus on your own legal position. Smart advice. I DM my attorney friend Rhea Kapoor, who specializes in family law and drafted our prenup. She reminds me not to sign any acknowledgement of paternity before we get test results, and she flags specific clauses in our prenup about infidelity and dissipation of marital assets. Apparently, if Rena has been using joint funds to facilitate an extramarital affair, that could be considered waste of marital property, which affects how assets get divided if this goes to divorce court. The beautiful thing about having lawyer friends is that they think like lawyers, which means they understand that emotions are secondary to legal strategy. Rhea doesn't ask me how I'm feeling or whether I want to work things out. She asks me whether I've documented the timeline, whether I've secured my separate property, and whether I've avoided any behavior that could be construed as condonation of the affair. I spend the rest of the morning organizing evidence like I'm preparing for a board meeting. Screenshots organized by date. Financial records showing unusual spending patterns. Calendar entries that don't match her explanations. Travel receipts that tell a story she never bothered to share with me. It's all very clinical and professional, which is exactly how I need to handle this if I want to come out the other side with my assets intact and my reputation undamaged. The irony is that Rena always made fun of how I approach problems like a consultant, break everything down into data points, identify key risks, develop mitigation strategies, implement solutions with measurable outcomes. She used to say it was cute how I turned everything into a business case study. Turns out that analytical approach is exactly what you need when your wife tells you she might be pregnant with her boss's baby. By lunchtime, I have a complete file of evidence, a secured asset position, and a legal strategy that doesn't involve me doing anything stupid like confronting Kyle or posting angry messages on social media. I also have a Macallan 25 that's still sitting untouched on the kitchen counter because apparently some problems are too big even for $4,000 whiskey. At 2:47 p.m., I decide it's time to have a conversation with Kyle Mercer. Not because I want to, but because in any good crisis management strategy, you need to understand what all the players know and what they're planning to do about it. I'm sitting in my home office, looking out at Central Park where people are walking their dogs and pretending their biggest problem is whether to get a latte or a cappuccino, and I'm about to call the man who's been fucking my wife. Kyle's direct line rings 4 times before he picks up. His voice has that practiced smoothness that comes from years of client development and investor pitches. Marcus Hale, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I bet you weren't. I keep my tone conversational, like we're discussing portfolio performance or market conditions. We need to talk about Rena. The line goes dead. Just like that. Kyle fucking hangs up on me like I'm some cold-calling telemarketer trying to sell him extended warranty coverage. The audacity is actually impressive. This is a man who's been sleeping with my wife, potentially got her pregnant, and thinks hanging up the phone is a viable strategy for managing the situation. My phone rings 30 seconds later. Same number. I didn't know you two were. He pauses, searching for words like a CEO, trying to navigate an earnings call when the numbers are shit. Married. She told me you were basically roommates. Separated, but living together for financial reasons. And there it is. The rationalization that cheating spouses and their partners always use to make themselves feel better about destroying someone else's life. We're basically roommates. It doesn't count if we're not really together. He thought he was some kind of white knight rescuing a woman from a loveless marriage, when in reality, he was just another supervising partner taking advantage of his position to sleep with a subordinate. She mentioned the pregnancy. I say, because I want to see how he handles this particular piece of information. Silence. The kind of silence you hear in board meetings right before someone announces massive layoffs or a failed acquisition. Then, Jesus. I didn't. We were careful. I mean, it was only supposed to be. One mistake. I suggest helpfully. Yeah, exactly. One mistake. His voice gets stronger, like he's convincing himself as much as me. Then he slips, the way people always do when they're trying too hard to minimize their involvement. I mean, it happened a few times, but we weren't. It wasn't supposed to be anything serious. A few times. Not once. Not a momentary lapse in judgment during a stressful case. A few times, which means this was an ongoing affair, not a one-night mistake that spiraled out of control. I make a mental note to update my evidence file with this admission. Kyle starts talking faster now, like a startup founder trying to convince VCs that his burn rate isn't actually that concerning. He begs me not to tell Aria Leone, his fiancée and the principal at Meridian Ventures who led Jurasight's series a funding round. Their board is apparently preparing an acquisition pitch to Blackstone's private equity arm, and a workplace scandal involving the CEO could completely derail the deal. The due diligence process alone would kill us, Kyle says, and I can hear the panic creeping into his voice. Any hint of HR violations or compliance issues, and they'll walk. We're talking about a 9-figure exit. Marcus, this could ruin everything. I almost laugh. This could ruin everything. Not the fact that he's been having an affair with a subordinate, potentially violating about 6 different employment laws and professional responsibility rules. Not the fact that he might have gotten another man's wife pregnant. Not the fact that his actions could expose his company to sexual harassment lawsuits and hostile work environment claims. No, the thing that worries him is how it might affect his ability to cash out at maximum valuation. I'm not your cleanup crew, I tell him, which is probably the most restrained thing I've said all day. What I don't tell him is that through an SPV I manage for high-net-worth clients, I hold convertible notes in Jurasight worth about $750,000. I attend their quarterly shareholder updates. I know exactly how their revenue metrics are trending, how their customer acquisition costs are scaling, and how their churn rates compare to industry benchmarks. I also know exactly how a hostile takeover starts: bad headlines, nervous investors, pulled term sheets, and emergency bridge financing with liquidation preferences that fuck over common shareholders. Kyle keeps talking, spinning this elaborate story about how the affair started during the Henderson arbitration when they were working 18-hour days and emotions were running high. How Rena seemed so unhappy at home, so isolated, so desperate for someone who understood the pressures of high-stakes litigation. How he never meant for it to go as far as it did. But there was this connection, this intellectual chemistry that just felt so natural. It's a beautiful narrative, really. Very romantic. The kind of story that would make a great subplot in a legal drama where attractive lawyers find love while fighting for justice. Unfortunately, it's also complete bullshit, because what actually happened is that a supervising partner used his position of authority to seduce a junior associate who was probably worried about her career advancement and performance reviews. "Look," Kyle says, and now his voice has shifted into full damage control mode. "What do you need from me to make this go away quietly? I can transfer some equity positions, maybe bring you into the acquisition as a consultant. There are ways to handle this that work for everyone. And there's the kicker, the quid pro quo, the attempt to turn my wife's infidelity into a business opportunity that benefits me financially." Kyle Mercer, CEO and master manipulator, trying to solve his personal problems the same way he'd solve a vendor dispute or a contract negotiation, by finding the right price point that makes everyone happy. "I don't think you understand the situation," I tell him. "This isn't a deal that needs structuring. This is you fucking my wife and potentially getting her pregnant. There's no term sheet for that." More silence. "Then, what are you going to do?" "It's a fair question. What am I going to do? I could expose him to Arya, blow up his acquisition deal, and probably tank my own investment in the process. I could report him to his firm's general counsel and HR department, triggering an investigation that would destroy his legal career. I could leak the story to Above the Law or some other legal gossip blog and let the court of public opinion handle the rest. Or I could do what smart investors do when they find themselves holding a position in a company with serious governance problems. I could wait, gather more information, and position myself to benefit from the chaos that's inevitably coming." Rena comes home at 8:30 p.m. with Thai takeout from that place on Columbus that charges $48 for pad Thai because it's artisanal and uses sustainable ingredients. She's trying to act normal, which would be admirable if normal hadn't been completely redefined by this morning's breakfast revelation. She sets the food on our dining table, the one that costs 12 grand and looks like it belongs in a museum, and starts talking about her day like she didn't drop a paternity bombshell 8 hours ago. "The Henderson deposition went well," she says, unpacking containers with the focused attention of someone who's definitely not making eye contact. "Kyle thinks we might be able to settle before trial." Kyle thinks. Of course he does. Kyle probably thinks about a lot of things, including whether he's about to become a father and whether his Series B investors would appreciate knowing their CEO has been violating company policy by sleeping with subordinates at the law firm that handles their corporate compliance. I'm sitting across from her, watching her serve herself green curry like this is just another Tuesday night, and I realize I'm looking at someone I don't actually know anymore. This woman who can argue complex litigation strategy in front of federal judges and negotiate settlement terms that make opposing counsel cry, but apparently can't figure out how to use birth control or basic professional boundaries. "About the DNA test," she starts, and I can see her shifting into lawyer mode, the same way she probably approaches difficult negotiations with clients who don't want to hear that their contract is unenforceable. "What about it?" "I've been thinking." She sets down her fork and looks at me directly for the first time since she got home. "Biology doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, you love me. Men raise children that aren't biologically theirs all the time. Blended families, adoption, sperm donors, it's completely normal now." I almost choke on my spring roll. The audacity of this argument is breathtaking. She's literally trying to convince me that paternity is just a social construct, like gender roles or the concept of business casual. That I should be excited to raise Kyle Mercer's potential offspring because love conquers all and biology is just details. Lots of couples deal with fertility issues, she continues, warming up to her theme. Some use donor eggs, donor sperm, surrogates. This isn't really that different. It's completely different, I say, and my voice sounds calmer than I feel. Those couples make informed decisions together. They don't find out about third-party genetic material through surprise announcements over breakfast. She reaches into her purse and pulls out a folded document. Hospital letterhead. Official looking. I brought this from the clinic, she says, sliding it across the table. It's just a standard form. If you could pre-sign it, it would make things smoother when the baby comes. Less paperwork, less stress for everyone. I unfold the document and read it like I'm reviewing a term sheet, because that's basically what it is. Acknowledgement of paternity, signed by the presumptive father, filed with New York State Department of Health, legally establishing parental rights and responsibilities including child support, health insurance coverage, and inheritance claims. This isn't a standard form, I tell her, sliding it back across our $12,000 dining table. This is a legal document that makes me financially responsible for a child that might not be mine. You're asking me to sign a contract without knowing the terms. Her face flushes, and I can see her recalibrating her approach like a CEO whose board just rejected the quarterly budget. It's about commitment, Marcus. It's about showing that you're willing to be a father regardless of biology. No, I say, and the word hangs in the air like a failed motion for summary judgment. It's about liability. We'll wait for the doctor. Rena switches tactics, pivoting to what I call the luxury peace offering strategy. She tells me she's made a reservation at 11 Madison Park for Friday night. The $48,000 venue package that includes private dining room, wine pairings, and what the website calls an unforgettable culinary journey. She mentions a weekend getaway to Napa Valley on a private jet, staying at Auberge du Soleil, touring wineries that most people only read about in Wine Spectator. We could use some time away, she says. Just the two of us. No work, no stress, no lawyers or doctors or tests. We could remember why we fell in love. The romantic reconciliation approach. Classic move for someone who's been caught cheating. Overwhelm the betrayed spouse with expensive gestures and hope that luxury can substitute for trust. The problem is that I know exactly how much money she makes as a litigation associate, and it's not enough to casually drop 50 grand on a reconciliation weekend. Which means she's either planning to put it on our joint credit cards, or Kyle is funding this apology tour, which would make it even more insulting. I'll pass, I tell her. She stares at me like I just declined a Series A investment opportunity with guaranteed 10x returns. You're not even willing to try? I'm willing to wait for facts. Everything else is just expensive noise. After dinner, while she's taking a shower, I schedule the DNA test at a discreet clinic in Midtown that specializes in high-net-worth clients who need medical services that don't show up in insurance records or gossip columns. I also have a conversation with Miguel, our building's concierge, about restricting keycard access to the wine room and home office starting next week. Not because I'm planning to lock Rena out, but because I want to know if anyone else has been accessing our apartment while I'm at work. I spend an hour doing what I call a closing checklist, inventorying everything in the apartment like I'm preparing for an asset purchase agreement. The artwork we bought together during our honeymoon in Italy, the Rolex collection I started before we got married, my Series A certificates from 3 different startups that are all approaching IPO, the Tesla title that's in my name only, the wine collection that includes bottles worth more than most people's cars. I'm not making any hard moves yet, just creating a clean ledger. Because if this situation goes sideways, and every instinct I have tells me it's already sideways and just hasn't hit the ground yet, I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with. In business, you never make major decisions based on incomplete information, and you never sign contracts without understanding the full scope of your obligations. The same principles apply to marriage, apparently. Even when your wife is trying to convince you that biology doesn't matter and paternity is just a social construct that can be solved with expensive dinner reservations and private jet getaways. The Midtown Clinic looks like a luxury hotel lobby that decided to moonlight as a medical facility. All marble surfaces, fresh orchids, and the kind of discreet elegance that screams, "We charge what your insurance company wishes they could refuse to pay." It's 10:15 a.m. on Thursday, and I'm sitting next to Rena in chairs that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, watching her fidget with her Hermes bag like it contains state secrets instead of just expensive lip gloss and anxiety. Nurse Nia calls us back, And she's got that professional warmth, that medical staff perfect when they're dealing with patients who can afford to pay cash for services that might appear in tabloids if handled incorrectly. She checks her chart, looks up at me with a smile that's probably been practiced in a mirror, and says, "Mr. Hale, we have your sample from last week." Rena blinks. Once, twice, like a computer processing an error message it wasn't programmed to handle. Last week, I keep my face completely neutral, the same expression I use during board meetings when someone announces that burn rates are higher than projected, but everything is definitely under control. I came early to save time, I say, which is complete bullshit, but delivered with the confidence of someone who spent years convincing investors that risky ventures are actually conservative plays. Nurse Nia looks between us, reading the tension in the room like a compliance officer reviewing suspicious transactions. For a moment, I think she's going to call me out on the obvious lie, but then she finds what she needs in her professional training. "Oh yes, there was a filing error in our system. Let me just..." She makes some notes on her tablet, the kind of administrative theater that gives everyone a moment to reset their positions. The beautiful thing about expensive private clinics is that their staff are trained to handle wealthy people's complicated situations with the kind of discretion that money can buy. They understand that when someone pays cash for DNA testing, there might be circumstances that require creative interpretations of timeline and procedure. Dr. Inez Martinez walks in 5 minutes later, and she's exactly what you'd want in a doctor who's about to deliver potentially life-changing news. Warm eyes, precise movements, and the kind of calm authority that comes from years of medical school and probably 6 figures worth of student loans that she's definitely paid off by now given what this place charges. For accuracy, Dr. Martinez says, settling into her chair with the practiced ease of someone who's delivered difficult news before. All potential fathers should be tested. Rena tries to shut this down immediately. "That's not necessary. We already know." "Actually, it is necessary," I interrupt, pulling out my phone. "Kyle needs to be here." I text him, "Now." One word, because in crisis situations, complexity is the enemy of action. Kyle understands leverage and consequences better than most people, and he knows that ignoring this text would be like declining to participate in due diligence during an acquisition. Technically possible, but strategically fucking stupid. 20 minutes later, Kyle Mercer walks through the clinic doors wearing a Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Nurse Nia makes in a month, and he's not alone. Aria Leone is with him, and she looks like every VC principal I've ever met. Sharp, expensive, and completely uninterested in tolerating bullshit from anyone who can't demonstrate clear value proposition. The waiting room freezes like someone just announced that Series B funding fell through and everyone's equity is worthless. Aria stares at Rena with the kind of analytical intensity that private equity partners use when they're evaluating management teams for potential replacement. It's the look of someone who spent years identifying risk factors and inefficient capital allocation, now applying those same skills to her fiancé's personal life. "You've been sleeping with my fiancé?" Aria asks, and her voice has the controlled calm of someone who's fired CEOs for missing revenue targets. "Your subordinate boss?" Rena stammers something about not knowing Kyle was engaged, which is laughable because anyone who spent 5 minutes researching Jurasite knows that Aria Leone led their Series A and sits on their board of directors. Her engagement to Kyle was announced in the Wall Street Journal business section 6 months ago, right next to an article about their company's machine learning algorithms revolutionizing legal document review. Kyle whispers something about how Rena knew, but she didn't understand the full scope of his relationship with Aria, which is the kind of semantic bullshit that works in contract negotiations but sounds pathetic when you're talking about basic human decency. Dr. Martinez cuts through the interpersonal drama like a federal judge ruling on summary judgment motions. "We need samples from both potential fathers," she says, because apparently this is what her Thursday morning looks like now. Mediating paternity disputes between people who collectively probably own enough equity to buy small countries. The blood draws happen in silence. Vials labeled with codes instead of names, chain of custody forms that look like legal documents, and the kind of clinical efficiency that turns emotional chaos into data points that can be analyzed and quantified. This is what happens when you strip away all the relationship drama and focus on facts. You get medical professionals doing their jobs while everyone else processes the reality that biology doesn't care about stock options or partnership tracks or carefully negotiated prenuptial agreements. Kyle keeps checking his phone like he's expecting urgent messages from investors who somehow sense that their portfolio company's CEO is currently providing DNA samples to determine paternity of his subordinate's pregnancy. Arya hasn't said another word since her initial question, but she's watching everything with the focused attention of someone who's calculating how this situation affects her firm's position in Juricide and whether they need to initiate damage control protocols. Rena looks like a litigation associate who just realized she filed the wrong motion in federal court and opposing counsel is about to eat her alive in front of the judge. All that confidence she usually carries, all that sharp legal reasoning that makes her dangerous in depositions, gone. Replaced by the reality that she's managed to create a situation that makes a hostile takeover look like a friendly merger discussion. The samples go to the lab with express processing, because when you're paying premium prices for discrete medical services, you get premium turnaround times. Dr. Martinez tells us results will be available in 1 week, which feels simultaneously like forever and not nearly enough time to prepare for whatever comes next. As we're leaving, I catch Arya checking her phone, probably already drafting messages to her partners about potential reputational risks and governance concerns. Kyle looks like a CEO who just learned that his biggest client is terminating their contract, and Rena looks like someone who's finally understanding that actions have consequences, even when you're really good at arguing that they shouldn't. A week later, we're all back in the same clinic waiting room that now feels like a boardroom where everyone's about to get fired. The air is thick with the kind of tension you usually only see during hostile acquisition negotiations or when quarterly earnings come in 30% below projections. Rena is sitting 2 chairs away from me, which is probably the closest we've been all week since she's been staying late at the office every night, and I've been sleeping in the guest room of our Upper West Side penthouse like a stranger in my own home. Kyle and Arya arrived separately this time, which tells me everything I need to know about how their relationship is handling this particular stress test. Kyle's wearing another Tom Ford suit, but this one looks like he slept in it, and Arya's got that sharp-eyed focus of a VC principal who's just discovered that the startup she funded has been cooking their books. She's probably already calculating liquidation preferences and wondering whether this clusterfuck affects her fund's returns. Dr. Martinez walks in carrying a manila folder that might as well be labeled "Everyone's life is about to change," and settles into her chair with the practiced calm of someone who delivers life-altering news for a living. She opens the folder, reviews her notes like a federal judge about to issue a ruling, and looks up at us with the kind of professional composure that expensive medical training provides. "Mr. Hale," she says, and I can feel everyone in the room holding their breath like investors waiting for earnings announcements. "You are not the biological father." The words hit me like a margin call I wasn't expecting, even though I was prepared for this exact possibility. Intellectually, I knew this was likely. Emotionally, hearing it confirmed feels like watching your portfolio crash in real time while you're powerless to stop the bleeding. I was ready for this hit, but it still lands like a hostile takeover bid that comes out of nowhere and destroys everything you thought you knew about your position. Dr. Martinez turns to Kyle, and his face goes through about 6 different expressions in 2 seconds, like a CEO trying to process multiple crisis scenarios simultaneously. "Mr. Mercer, you are not the biological father either." The room explodes like a board meeting where someone just announced that the company's been operating under fraudulent financial statements for the past 3 years. Rena starts shouting about faulty tests and laboratory errors and demanding second opinions like she's arguing an appeal that she knows she's going to lose. Kyle's demanding a retest with the kind of desperation usually reserved for startup founders whose Series B just fell through. Arya is half laughing in a way that suggests she's either having a breakdown or she's already calculating how this absurd situation affects her investment thesis. Dr. Martinez raises her hand like a judge calling for order in a courtroom where opposing counsel have started throwing depositions at each other. "There's more," she says, and the room goes silent because apparently this situation can get worse, which seems mathematically impossible, but here we are. "Rena, your blood work shows a chemical pregnancy, very early stage, and no longer viable." The fetal DNA we analyzed does not match either potential father present today. She pauses, letting this information sink in like a compliance violation that's about to trigger regulatory investigation. That means there was a third potential father whose DNA we have not tested. The word third hits the room like news that your biggest client just terminated their contract and your main competitor just raised a Series C round that makes your valuation look like a rounding error. Rena goes completely white, the kind of pale you see in startup founders when they realize their burn rate calculations were off by an order of magnitude, and they've got 6 weeks of runway left. Kyle looks like a CFO who just discovered that their accounts receivable includes a lot of IOUs written in crayon. He's staring at Rena like she's a financial statement that keeps changing every time he looks at it, and he's trying to reconcile numbers that don't add up no matter how he runs the analysis. Aria's expression has shifted from angry to fascinated, like a venture capitalist who's just discovered that the company she thought was a disaster is actually an elaborate case study in human behavior that's more entertaining than most reality TV shows. Rena's voice comes out like a whisper, like someone admitting to securities fraud in front of a grand jury. The Legal Tech Conference in Miami. March. She looks around the room at all of us, staring at her like investors who just learned their due diligence process missed some fairly significant red flags. Hotel bar. Derek Blake, M&A counsel who pitched Jurasite a restructuring idea. Derek fucking Blake. I know exactly who she's talking about. Corporate attorney at one of those white shoe firms that charges $800 an hour for junior associates to review contracts. He's been circling Jurasite for months, trying to position his firm for their upcoming acquisition work, and apparently he decided to position himself for my wife as well. Aria's mouth tightens like a private equity partner who just realized that their portfolio company's management team has been making unauthorized capital expenditures. You slept with our potential legal counsel during acquisition due diligence? She asks, and her voice has the kind of controlled fury that makes venture capitalists legendary for their ability to destroy entrepreneurs' dreams with surgical precision. Kyle now looks like he's processing the fact that his extramarital affair was actually just one part of a much larger pattern of poor decision-making by someone he thought he knew. It's the expression of a CEO who just learned that his star employee has been embezzling funds while also running a competing business on the side. The beautiful irony is that Rena, who bills 2,800 hours a year arguing complex legal strategies and probably makes more money than most small business owners, managed to create a situation that's more complicated than most corporate restructuring deals I've analyzed. She turned what should have been a simple paternity question into a multi-party dispute involving professional ethics violations, potential malpractice claims, and enough conflicts of interest to keep a compliance department busy for months. Dr. Martinez is still talking about chemical pregnancies and early-stage viability, but everyone stopped listening because we're all processing the fact that this entire drama was based on a pregnancy that no longer exists and a child that was never actually viable. We've been fighting over custody of a situation that resolved itself while we were arguing about DNA tests and legal liability. It's like discovering that the hostile takeover you've been defending against was based on financial projections that were completely fictional from the beginning. Outside the clinic, Rena is trying to salvage this situation like a startup founder whose pitch deck just got destroyed in front of investors, but who still thinks there's a way to close the round. She's begging me to go home and talk this through, using the same tone she probably uses with opposing counsel when she's trying to negotiate settlements that everyone knows she's going to lose. You go home, I tell her, and my voice has that flat calm of someone who's already made the decision and is just communicating the terms. I won't be there. She stares at me like I just announced that I'm divesting from a profitable portfolio company for no apparent reason. Marcus, please. I know this looks bad, but we can work through this. Couples therapy, marriage counseling, whatever you want. I almost laugh. This looks bad. Like infidelity with multiple partners during a 3-month period is just a minor accounting discrepancy that can be resolved with better internal controls and quarterly check-ins with a relationship consultant. Let me make sure I understand the situation correctly. I say, because when you're terminating business relationships, clarity is essential. Affair with your supervising partner, who's also a vendor CEO in my investment portfolio. Second affair with M&A counsel during acquisition due diligence. Attempted manipulation to sign paternity acknowledgement forms. Trying to bypass laboratory results through luxury reconciliation packages. Does that cover the major points, or did I miss anything? Rena's face goes through the same progression of expressions I've seen in board meetings when management realizes their explanation for missing revenue targets isn't going to satisfy the shareholders. Denial, anger, bargaining, and then that moment of recognition that the situation is beyond damage control. I pull out my phone and email Rhea Kapoor to start drafting a separation agreement under our prenuptial terms. The prenup we signed 3 years ago includes specific language about infidelity triggers, and thanks to Rhea's paranoid attention to detail, adultery automatically activates separate property protections. No interim spousal support while Rena's earning a 6-figure salary at a white shoe law firm. No claims against my portfolio holdings, my SPV investments, or my carried interest in 3 different venture capital funds. Clean separation of assets, just like we'd structure a corporate spinoff. While I'm typing, I also send a brief, factual note to Kravitz's general counsel and HR department. Nothing emotional, nothing vindictive, just a professional heads up about potential supervisor-subordinate relationship issues that might create conflicts of interest with vendor relationships. I don't mention names, but I include enough details about timing and parties involved that their compliance department can connect the dots if they're motivated to investigate. You're reporting me to HR? Rena asks, reading over my shoulder with the horror of someone who just realized their professional reputation is about to become a cautionary tale in legal ethics seminars. I'm reporting compliance concerns to the appropriate departments. I correct. Their policies are clear about relationships between supervisors and subordinates, especially when the supervisor is also CEO of a vendor company that handles sensitive client data. This isn't revenge, it's risk management. The beautiful thing about working in finance is that you learn to separate emotional responses from business necessity. Rena's career might suffer consequences from her own choices, but that's not my responsibility to manage or mitigate. I'm not her compliance officer, her HR representative, or her damage control consultant. I also send a quick message to my VC contact Noah Stein. Heads up, key person risk at Jurasite developing. Expect potential headlines around governance and professional conduct issues. Board might want to convene sooner rather than later. Noah replies within 5 minutes. Understood. Already hearing whispers. Board emergency meeting scheduled for Monday. Thanks for the advance warning. That's the difference between professional networks and personal relationships. In business, people appreciate accurate information delivered in time to make strategic decisions. In marriage, apparently, people prefer luxury vacation packages and expensive dinners to actual honesty. I head back to our Upper West Side penthouse to pack a weekender bag, but first I stop at the building's concierge desk to handle some administrative details. Miguel looks up from his computer with the kind of professional discretion that comes from working in a building where the residents pay more in monthly maintenance fees than most people earn in salary. Mr. Hale, how can I help you today? I need to change the smart lock codes on the apartment, I tell him. Also updating authorized access for the wine room and home office storage. Just temporary security measures. Miguel nods like this is completely routine, because in a building full of high-net-worth individuals, relationship drama that requires asset protection is probably Tuesday morning paperwork. He handles the electronic updates while I sign authorization forms, and within 10 minutes I've effectively changed the locks without technically locking anyone out. Rena can still access the main apartment, but the areas with my important documents and valuable collections now require updated codes that only I know. I pack efficiently, enough clothes for a week, my laptop with encrypted financial records, important documents that aren't already stored in safety deposit boxes, and the bottle of Macallan 25 that's been sitting untouched on our kitchen counter since this whole situation started. If I'm going to process the end of my marriage, I might as well do it with whiskey that costs more per ounce than most people spend on lunch. My Midtown crash pad is a 1-bedroom above our family office that I've been using for late nights when market volatility keeps me working past midnight. It's not luxurious like the penthouse, but it's functional and private, and right now privacy feels more valuable than marble countertops and Central Park views. I pour 2 fingers of the Macallan and sit by the window, looking out at the city where millions of people are probably dealing with their own relationship disasters, most of them without the complication of overlapping professional networks and equity holdings that make every personal decision a potential business liability. My phone buzzes with a text from Liam. "How did the test results go?" I reply, "Complicated. No longer married. Probably richer. Definitely need better due diligence processes for future relationships." Liam texts back, "Want to talk about it? Already handled it like a business transaction. Much more efficient than therapy." Which is true. When you approach relationship problems the same way you'd handle a failing investment, cut losses, protect remaining assets, and learn from the experience, the emotional processing becomes much more manageable. It's amazing how much clarity you can achieve when you stop trying to salvage something that was never properly structured to begin with. The fallout starts exactly the way I predicted it would, with social media posts that make about as much strategic sense as announcing quarterly losses on Twitter before filing with the SEC. Rena goes full damage control on Instagram, with a tearful story that frames me as the heartless husband who abandoned her during a miscarriage, complete with black and white photos and inspirational quotes about resilience that would make a crisis communications consultant weep with professional embarrassment. The post gets 47 likes before Aria Leone responds with her own story that includes dates, screenshots of the clinic summary, and a caption that reads like a forensic accountant's report on embezzlement. Interesting narrative. Here are the actual facts. The post includes a timeline that makes Rena's version look like financial projections written by someone who's never seen a balance sheet. Rena's original post disappears within 6 hours. She goes completely dark on social media after that, which is probably the smartest strategic decision she's made in months. I'm sitting in my Midtown office reviewing quarterly portfolio performance when my phone starts buzzing with messages from people in our overlapping professional networks. Apparently, when you work in finance and law in Manhattan, everybody knows everybody, and relationship drama travels faster than insider trading rumors. Tolu texts, "Heard about the situation. HR investigation launched at Kravith. Kyle's firm implementing mandatory compliance training." Ria sends a longer message. "Separation agreement drafted per your prenup. Clean asset division, no contested issues. Should be finalized within 2 weeks." Even my Tesla service advisor reaches out. "Mr. Hale, we've received a request to add an authorized user to your vehicle account. Declined per your standing instructions." The fact that Rena tried to get access to my Tesla remotely tells me everything I need to know about how she's handling this separation. She's still thinking like someone who believes she can negotiate her way out of consequences through persistence and technical workarounds. Meanwhile, the business side of this clusterfuck is developing into exactly the kind of corporate governance crisis that makes private equity investors nervous and board members start updating their resumes. At Jurisight, the emergency board meeting I predicted has expanded into what Noah Stein describes as a full fucking audit of management practices and cultural risk factors. The pending acquisition with Blackstone's private equity arm has shifted from active negotiation to what corporate lawyers politely call extended due diligence, which is business speak for "we're going to investigate every email, expense report, and coffee meeting until we understand exactly how toxic this management team actually is." Kyle, in a move that surprises absolutely no one who understands how these situations typically develop, resigns as CEO to focus on family and personal matters. The press release makes it sound voluntary and amicable, but anyone who reads corporate announcements for a living knows that focusing on family usually means forced out by the board before the scandal gets worse. Brooke Tan, the CFO, becomes interim CEO while the board conducts a comprehensive search for permanent leadership. Brooke's smart, competent, and most importantly, hasn't been sleeping with subordinates or potential legal counsel. She's also been quietly building relationships with key investors for months, which suggests she saw this leadership transition coming long before Kyle's personal life exploded. I get a call from Omar Kadir, a principal at the private equity fund that was originally planning to acquire Jurisight. Omar and I have done deals together before, and he's one of those PE guys who can smell opportunity in other people's disasters the way sharks detect blood in water. This Kyle situation, Omar says without preamble, it's created some interesting possibilities. How interesting. The board's looking for a structured bridge to get through the leadership transition and the acquisition delay. They need capital that comes with governance improvements and adult supervision. He pauses. You know this company better than most investors. You've been holding convertible notes through that SPV for 18 months. What Omar's describing is a classic private equity rescue scenario. Existing management fucks up so badly that outside investors can come in with bridge financing that includes governance controls, board seats, and liquidation preferences that essentially let you buy the company at a discount while making it look like you're helping. What kind of structure are we talking about? Bridge converts with downside protection. We lead, you co-invest, maybe bring in 2 other strategic investors who understand legal tech. New governance package that includes board chair with veto power on executive hires. Restructuring plan that right-sizes the burn rate while protecting the machine learning roadmap. It's a beautiful deal structure, really. Kyle's personal disasters have created a situation where we can effectively take control of a profitable legal tech company at below-market valuation while positioning ourselves as the responsible investors who saved it from management incompetence. The board meeting is tomorrow, Omar continues. Brooks presenting 3 options. Sell to Blackstone at a 30% haircut, try to raise emergency capital through existing investors, or accept our bridge proposal. What does Arya think about this? Arya is recusing herself from board discussions about management changes, given her personal involvement with Kyle. But her fund's other partners are very interested in protecting their Series A investment through better governance structures. We spend another 20 minutes working through term sheets, liquidation preferences, and anti-dilution provisions. By the time we hang up, I'm looking at a potential co-investment opportunity that could return 3x over 2 years if we can stabilize the company and resume acquisition discussions with strategic buyers. The irony is delicious. Kyle's affair with my wife has created the exact kind of corporate governance crisis that lets sophisticated investors acquire valuable companies at distressed valuations. His personal poor judgment becomes my professional opportunity. I draft an investment memo for our family office committee, outlining the Jurasite bridge opportunity and the governance improvements we'd implement to protect investor capital. The memo includes sections on management risk mitigation, cultural assessment protocols, and enhanced compliance frameworks that would prevent the kind of supervisor-subordinate relationship problems that created this situation. It reads like a business case study in how personal misconduct creates investment opportunities for people who can separate emotional reactions from strategic thinking. That evening, I pour myself 3 fingers of Macallan 25 and review the proposed term sheet one more time. Tomorrow, I'll be sitting in a boardroom helping to restructure a company whose CEO was sleeping with my wife. I'll probably make more money from this deal than I lost in the divorce settlement. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just superior risk management and the ability to recognize opportunity when other people create chaos. 3 days after the Jurasite board meeting, where Omar and I successfully structured a bridge round that gives us effective control of the company, while Kyle's reputation becomes a cautionary tale in corporate governance seminars. I get a text from an unknown number that reads like the opening line of a legal thriller. This is Celine Park, Derek Blake's wife. Can we talk? Derek Blake, the M&A counsel from Miami who apparently decided that legal tech conference networking should include sleeping with other attendees' wives. The third potential father who turned Rena's pregnancy scare into a multi-party paternity dispute that would make a corporate restructuring look simple by comparison. I agree to meet Celine at a cafe in Tribeca that's expensive enough to ensure privacy, but not so exclusive that it looks like we're conducting some sort of illicit business transaction. She arrives exactly on time, carrying a leather portfolio that suggests she's approached this meeting with the same methodical preparation most people reserve for job interviews or deposition testimony. Celine Park looks like someone who married a successful attorney and learned to navigate the social politics of white-shoe law firms without losing her own identity in the process. Mid-30s, precise posture, and the kind of controlled composure that comes from years of attending partners' dinners where one wrong comment can affect your husband's career trajectory. "Thank you for meeting me," she says, settling into her chair with the careful grace of someone who's about to deliver information that will complicate several people's lives. "I assume you know why I wanted to talk. Derek and Rena." Miami conference. March. She nods and opens her portfolio like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. I found hotel receipts, conference materials, and some very interesting charges on our joint credit card that Derek couldn't adequately explain. She slides papers across the table between us. Room service for two at the Fontainebleau. Wine that costs more than most people's car payments. Spa services booked under both their names. I review the documents like I'm conducting due diligence on a potential acquisition target. Hotel folio showing a suite upgrade that Derek definitely didn't pay for himself on a corporate attorney's salary. Conference badges for the Legal Innovation Summit where Rena was supposedly attending panels on litigation technology and Derek was presenting on M&A strategies for legal tech startups. Room service orders that include champagne, oysters, and the kind of late-night indulgences that have nothing to do with professional networking. The timeline aligns perfectly with what Dr. Martinez described as the chemical pregnancy window, March 15th through 18th, when Rena told me she was attending mandatory continuing legal education seminars and Derek was pitching acquisition services to legal tech companies, including Jurasite. He told me it was a business trip, Celine continues, and her voice has the flat calm of someone who's moved past anger into strategic planning mode. Client development, potential referral relationships, the usual corporate law networking that pays for our lifestyle. She points to a specific line item on the hotel bill. This is a couple's massage package. Derek's idea of client development apparently includes Swedish massages and champagne service. I hand the documents back to her, but she shakes her head. Keep copies. I'm filing for divorce and forwarding everything to my firm's ethics committee. Derek's partners need to know that their M&A counsel has been conducting business development through extramarital affairs that could expose the firm to malpractice claims. Celine explains that she's also a lawyer, corporate compliance at a financial services firm, which means she understands exactly how professional misconduct investigations work and what kind of documentation creates liability for law firms whose partners violate professional responsibility rules. The interesting part, she says, pulling out her phone to show me screenshots, is that Derek billed 18 hours of client development time during the Miami conference. Apparently, sleeping with other attendees counts as billable work at his firm. The billing fraud angle makes this situation exponentially worse for Derek. It's one thing to have an affair during a business trip, but quite another to charge clients for time you spent having sex with someone else's wife. That's the kind of professional misconduct that gets attorneys disbarred and law firms sued for malpractice. What do you need from me? I ask, because Celine clearly didn't arrange this meeting just to share hotel receipts and express solidarity about cheating spouses. The clinic results, she says. Whatever medical documentation confirms the timeline and paternity testing. Derek's been telling people that Rena's pregnancy claims are fabricated, that she's trying to extort money from successful attorneys through false accusations. I give her Dr. Martinez's public-facing summary, the one that confirms chemical pregnancy during the March timeframe without revealing private medical details about other parties involved. It's enough information to establish that Derek's claims about fabricated pregnancy are bullshit while protecting everyone's medical privacy. Celine reviews the clinic summary with the focused attention of someone who's been building a legal case and just received the final piece of evidence she needed. Perfect. This corroborates the hotel timeline and contradicts Derek's version of events. She tells me that Derek's law firm is conducting its own internal investigation after receiving her complaints about billing irregularities and potential client conflicts. Apparently, Derek pitched acquisition services to 3 different legal tech companies during the Miami conference, including Jurasite, while simultaneously using firm resources to facilitate personal relationships that could compromise professional judgment. The ethics committee is particularly interested in whether Derek's personal relationship with Rena created conflicts of interest when he later pitched legal services to her firm's clients, Celine explains. If he was sleeping with a litigation associate while trying to sell M&A services to companies involved in her cases, that's a textbook example of professional responsibility violations. We finish our coffee while Celine explains her divorce strategy, asset protection, spousal support claims, and professional reputation management that sounds like a corporate restructuring plan applied to personal relationships. She's approaching her marriage dissolution the same way I handled mine. methodically, strategically, and with enough documentation to make opposing counsel weep. One more thing, she says as we're preparing to leave. Derek's been calling Rena, trying to coordinate their stories about Miami. Apparently, he's worried that multiple paternity claims make both of them look like they were conducting some sort of organized affair network. The idea that Derek and Rena are trying to manage this situation through coordinated damage control is almost charming in its naivety. They're treating a multi-party professional misconduct investigation like a business presentation that can be improved through better messaging and strategic communication. As I walk back to my office, I'm thinking about how personal disasters create opportunities for people who can process information objectively and act on strategic advantages rather than emotional impulses. Derek's billing fraud will probably destroy his legal career. Rena's multiple affairs have triggered compliance investigations at her firm. Kyle's resignation opened up a private equity investment opportunity that's already showing positive returns. Meanwhile, I'm sitting on a portfolio that's performing above projections, a divorce settlement that protects my assets, and enough documentation to ensure that none of this blows back on my professional reputation. A month later, I'm standing in the same Upper West Side penthouse kitchen where this whole clusterfuck started, but everything has changed in ways that would make a corporate restructuring consultant proud. The Marble Island still costs more than most people's cars, but now my Tesla key fob sits there without the anxiety of wondering who else might have access to my assets. My Tom Ford suits hang in the closet where they belong, no longer serving as props in elaborate lies about late-night board dinners that were actually extramarital affairs. The apartment feels different now, cleaner, quieter, like a portfolio after you've divested from underperforming investments and optimized your holdings for actual returns rather than emotional attachment. I keep the temperature exactly where I want it, play music that doesn't require compromise with anyone else's preferences, and pour expensive whiskey without having to explain why I deserve it after the day I've had. The family office portfolio is performing better than projected. I trimmed beta exposure across our tech holdings, added a significant position in Legal Flow, a Jurasite competitor that's building a safer machine learning stack with better governance controls and no scandals involving CEO misconduct. We anchored their Series B round with a governance package that I helped design, including board representation, anti-dilution protection, and the kind of compliance frameworks that prevent the interpersonal disasters that destroyed Kyle's company. The Jurasite Bridge investment is already showing positive returns. Under Brooke Tan's leadership, the company has implemented cultural changes that would make HR consultants weep with professional pride. Mandatory compliance training, clear policies about supervisor-subordinate relationships, and governance structures that prevent any single executive from making decisions that expose the company to reputational risk. Kyle Mercer is reportedly exploring new opportunities in legal tech consulting, which is corporate speak for unemployable at any serious company and trying to reinvent himself as an independent contractor. His LinkedIn profile now lists him as strategic advisor to emerging legal technology companies, which sounds impressive until you realize that nobody's actually paying him for strategic advice. Aria Leone has completely distanced herself from Kyle's professional network, focusing on her VC funds portfolio companies and probably thanking whatever investment gods exist that she discovered his character flaws before they got married and merged their assets. According to Noah Stein, she's been telling other investors that Kyle's situation demonstrates why their fund conducts extensive background checks on management teams, including personal integrity assessments that most VCs ignore. Rena tried to show up at my office once, 3 weeks ago, shouting about abandonment and emotional cruelty and demanding that I fight for our marriage, like we're characters in some romantic drama where grand gestures can overcome systematic betrayal. Kimmy from our family office HR department escorted her out with the kind of professional discretion that expensive security consultants provide, and I haven't heard from her since. My boss at the family office told me to take a week off, fully paid, after the situation became public knowledge. Not because my work performance suffered. If anything, my analytical approach to personal crisis management impressed our senior partners. But because they wanted to ensure that interpersonal drama didn't affect client relationships or investment decisions. I spent those 7 days in therapy with Dr. Cora Voss, a psychologist who specializes in high-net-worth individuals whose personal lives intersect with their professional responsibilities in complicated ways. Dr. Voss told me that I'd handled an emotional fire with water instead of gasoline, documenting everything, making strategic decisions based on facts rather than feelings, protecting assets while avoiding dramatic confrontations that would have made the situation worse. Most people in your situation would have confronted Kyle directly, posted angry social media responses, or tried to sabotage everyone involved, she explained during our third session. Instead, you treated it like a business problem that required risk management and strategic planning. That's actually quite healthy, even if it doesn't look like traditional emotional processing. At night, I pour exactly 1 glass of Macallan 25, never more than 2 fingers, and sit by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook Central Park, listening to the city noise that's replaced the constant courtroom arguments in my head. The whiskey tastes better now that I'm drinking it for celebration rather than consolation. Every sip represents money I didn't lose in a contested divorce, professional reputation I didn't destroy through emotional responses, and investment opportunities one was able to pursue because I stayed focused on facts instead of feelings. Last week, Rena sent one final message through our divorce attorney. You threw away something real for the sake of contracts and compliance rules. I drafted a response. I know exactly what I threw away. A marriage based on lies, financial fraud, and professional misconduct that was exposing me to legal liability I never consented to assume. I kept everything that was actually real. My assets, my reputation, and my ability to make strategic decisions based on accurate information. Then I deleted it and told Rhea to block all future communications that aren't required for finalizing the divorce paperwork. Because here's what I learned from this whole experience. In love, just like in business, you should never sign contracts based on false representations, especially paternity acknowledgments that make you legally responsible for other people's mistakes. Compliance isn't revenge. It's just enforcing the ground rules that everyone agreed to follow when they chose to operate in professional environments with ethical standards. When someone tells you they need a DNA test because their pregnancy might belong to their boss, believe every word of that sentence. Don't rationalize it. Don't negotiate around it. Don't hope that expensive dinners and private jet getaways will somehow transform fraud into romance. Book the fucking test and prepare for whatever results emerge from objective analysis. And when the doctor speaks, listen carefully. Medical professionals deal in facts, not narratives. The truth might flip everything you thought you knew about your situation, but it also clears the table so you can rebuild your life like a proper shareholder, quietly, precisely, and in complete control of your own equity position. I'm standing in my kitchen, perfectly organized and entirely mine, making breakfast that I'll actually eat instead of throwing away. The morning light streaming through those expensive windows illuminates a space that represents exactly what I'm worth and exactly what I've earned. It turns out that the best marriages, like the best investments, are built on accurate due diligence and complete transparency. Everything else is just expensive noise that dilutes returns and creates unnecessary liability. The eggs don't burn anymore. Neither do I.